Ever since the launch of the original Porsche Cayman in 2005, and especially after the very warm reception that car had in the media, there's been a slightly crackpot conspiracy theory going around about this mid-engine sports car. Specifically, that the car might one day become too good for its own good. The thinking was that if the Cayman was allowed to develop and fulfill its true potential as a driver's car, that it might upset the natural order of things. I mean, you wouldn't ever make a Cayman that was so good to drive that it might undermine the business case for something as mighty as, I don't know, the 911 GT3. Would you? Well, 2005 seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? Especially today. Since then, as the Cayman's specific customer base has grown, Porsche has been chipping away at the idea that it would somehow stifle the development of its own car with special series models like the 987 generation Cayman R and the 981 and 982 series Cayman GT4. It hasn't exactly been playing things safe. And now, well, if you still think Porsche's afraid to let this mid-engine car off the loose with a proper GT department halo model, prepare for a shock. This then is the new Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 RS. It's a car that Porsche GT department Don Andreas Preuninger credits to former head of R&D Wolfgang Hatz, who became preoccupied with the idea of a Cayman with the engine from a 911 GT3. That, in essence, is what we're looking at here. A Cayman with a 4-litre flat 6 that'll rev to 9,000 RPM and that develops nearly 500 horsepower, but that also weighs less than any 991 or 992 generation 911, and that has that ideal mid-engined weight distribution. It wasn't so easy to make the car's mechanical package work, according to Preuninger. Flipped through 180 degrees around the rear axle compared with its usual position, the GT3 engine needed new exhaust, induction and dry sump lubrication systems. In the GT4 RS, it actually drives through a short ratio PDK gearbox borrowed from a 991 series 911 GT3 RS. When they had a working prototype, Preuninger's team cleverly presented it to Dr. Hatz as a birthday present. And from that moment on, final sign-off for the car became something of a fait accompli. The GT4 RS makes 79 horsepower more than the most powerful Cayman to date, the GT4, but its shortened gearing also contributes significantly to its performance. It's half a second faster to 62 miles an hour from rest than the equivalent PDK-equipped Cayman GT4, and it hits 196 miles an hour flat out. The car has ball-jointed McPherson strut suspension, widened axle tracks, stiffened coil springs and retuned dampers and anti-roll bars. It has enlarged brakes too. It has some serious looking aerodynamic additions, and it's the first Cayman ever to use Michelin's stickiest Pilot Sport Cup 2R road legal track day tyre. Carbon fibre polymer frontal bodywork, lightweight glazing, carbon fibre seats and lightweight cabin fittings all save weight on the car, and if you want to save even more of it, you can add magnesium centre lock wheels, carbon ceramic brakes and a magnesium roll cage, all as options. Having said all that, this isn't a cheap car to begin with. Prices start at just above £108,000, with fully loaded cars likely to exceed 140. Production numbers aren't technically limited, but this is a modern Porsche GT car. If you're asking your dealer now how long the waiting list might be, good luck getting one. So we've come out for a little tootle on the road, just to get a feel for what this car would be like to use, you know, on a sort of an everyday basis. I dare say, if you've got £108,000 to spend on a Cayman and it's this special, you're probably not going to put 10,000 miles a year in it, are you? You're probably not going to just use it to nip down to the shops and take the kids to school, or rather, the kid. But you still want to know, don't you? You still want to think, well, if I had the opportunity and the cash, that's a car that I would want to use as often as I possibly could. And I think you could, you know, it's not actually too savage, this car. It's every bit as well-mannered and usable, I think, as a 911 GT3 is, maybe a bit more. So the low-speed ride is okay. It gets a little bit sort of tetchy, but only on, you know, cobblestones, over drains, manhole covers, that sort of thing. If you avoid the raised ironwork and the worst surfaces, yeah, there's a bit of cobblestone action here. You'll get a feel for what it's like. Sort of bearable, you know. There's a bit of nibble and fidget there, but it's nothing too sort of strenuous or onerous, or it's tolerable. Right, we're coming out of town a little bit here. The car handles like a Cayman, really. You know, they haven't messed about too much with extra pacey steering, or you know, I know it's got the Coupe 2 tyres on it, but it still has this lovely linearity about the way the thing corners. There's still a fluency to it, which is absolutely sort of central to the Cayman character type, isn't it? You know, it's really defining the way this car just flows down the road. I think on a long journey, if you were touring from whatever, London to Monaco, or you know, Edinburgh to wherever, you would want a set of these. This is the first press launch I've come on where they've given you earplugs, which is quite revealing, I think, about the car. They know it's noisy, and I think owners will know and expect it to be noisy. So it's noisy, but it's fine. It's not too bad at all. And then you come to the engine, which is just absolutely sensational. Oh, just listen to it. I mean, what you're hearing there is 99% induction roar of the kind that probably hasn't been heard in a production car since, I don't know, some 1970s homologation special on triple carbs with God knows what, you know. I mean, it just sounds otherworldly and brilliantly different from a GT3 as well. I think in a GT3 you get a lot more exhaust roar. You know, you can really hear the thing working, but in a different way. Whereas in the GT4 RS, what you hear is the induction hammer. You know, it's and it gives it a different sort of character. God knows what it will sound like on the back straight at Estoril at 9,000 RPM. Because on the road, you just stroke it along, and you sort of have to remind yourself to get it up and going above 6,000 RPM at times, because genuinely you forget, you know. And it's lovely enough to listen to just stroking along at sort of 2,500 RPM. But oh, what that's going to sound like, screaming its head off, going through the old Ayrton Senna curve. Well, it should be interesting. Fourth gear, that's 8,000, that's 9,000 RPM. Oh! Okay guys, welcome to Estoril. This is the GT4 RS. You might struggle to hear me at points because this is a very loud car, but it's also a little bit wonderful. So I might have to accelerate and then talk, or I might need subtitles, we'll see. Right, so first up, let's just listen. This is what a GT3 flat 6 revving to 9,000 RPM sounds like when it's right behind your head. There it goes. Oh my giddy aunt. That's so good. It's as if those intake tracks just give this car the sort of detail in that combustion sound that, oh, it's like you can hear things. It's like you've never heard an engine before. Never one that's quite like this anyway. So, is it fast? I think you can see the answer to that question is pretty unequivocal. This is the Senna curve. We're going to come out at about 90, fourth gear. That's 8,000. That's 9,000 RPM. Oh! Just so good. It's really fast. but so little you'd hardly notice. The PDK works brilliantly, by the way. I mean, there will be people who say, I'd rather have a manual, but not for me, not for track work like this. The PDK is just so lightning fast. And it makes the car so easy to drive. Oh, there it goes. Oh, couldn't you just listen to that all day until you went deaf? It would be a sublime way to go completely deaf. So, what else is there to cover? Well, obviously this is the first Cayman that's ever had a Coupe R tyre. It's got the wider tracks, it's got the bespoke spring and damper setup. Oh, the lateral grip is something else. I've never driven a Cayman that's anywhere near as sticky as this, and that'll be a lot to do with the tyre, but the fundamental balance of the chassis is obviously as stunning as it ever was, and the two things combine to just make this thing corner-like. An absolute rocket. It's a slightly sort of spikier, more grown-up thing than a Cayman usually is. People like this car, I think, because it's so benign, because the chassis is so forgiving and you can chuck it about, get away with all sorts. I suspect you still can in this, but it's definitely a bit more grown up when it starts to slide. It moves around a bit more suddenly, keeps you that bit more honest, which I have to say makes it all the more beguiling to me. Because if you've had Caymans before, you probably do want something a bit more challenging, and when you sort of get used to what the car wants to do and the speed that it wants to move around at, look, you can still do really silly things when you want to. It's just that bit naughtier as the grip fades away and then comes back in. You've got to be worthy of it. Oh, so good. I suppose what it comes down to is, you know, there are lots of ways you could spend £108,000 on a sports car, aren't there? And people will say, well, why on earth would I spend that money on a Cayman when I could have, you know, most of an Audi R8 or Lord knows what else? Why would I have one of these if I could have a GT3 or most of one instead? Well, I guess because it's different. Yeah, they've been making Caymans for a lot of years now and doing it spectacularly well. The possible exception of the 4-cylinder engines, which they will still defend, you know. They'll say owners love them. I think they've earned the right to make this car. I think people have been asking for it for long enough. And there is no denying how good it is. None whatsoever. I'm a bit blown away, folks. Coming back into the pit lane now, it's all over. I think you saw my skids. The instructor I'm following obviously is about to tell me off. Hey ho, too much fun. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And when I've calmed down, maybe I'll see you next time.